You don't wonder what you do?
No, I'm not that.
Good morning. Can you all hear us out there?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so before we get started with the formalities, the technical specifications of today's meeting, you're going to have to unmute yourself if you want to say something. We're going to vote and proceed according to the chairman, similar to the last several meetings where we'll go around. This time we can see almost everybody. Mr. Ward, I can't see. I don't know if he has his camera off. But everybody else we can see. You should be able to see who's on the screen as well. So it's going to proceed just like it did the last time, parliamentary-wise. But don't forget, you have to unmute to actually be able to say something.
Okay, thank you, Roger. At this time, I'd like to call to order the special board meeting of the Washington County Board of Supervisors on May 1st, 2020. Clary, Supervisor Clary, would you please lead us in prayer?
Yep. Father, we seek your wisdom daily. Be with people making decisions that affect the lives and futures of our families, communities, countries, and the wider world. We pray that they communicate clearly, truthfully, and calmly with each other and with the public, and that their messages are received and heeded. May truth and empathy be the touchstones of people setting policies for our protection. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hopes that he will continue to deliver us as you help us by your prayers. Amen.
Supervisor Bryan, would you listen to the pledge, please?
Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
Of the United States
to the republic for which it
and to the
stands,
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
justice
for
for
all.
all. In case of fire or other emergency, those in the main chamber, please go to the nearest door, find the nearest stairway, go down the stairway and clear the building so rescue squads and emergency squads can do their job. Thank you. Please silence your cell phones. Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hankey.
Here.
Mrs. Fedler. Mrs. Fedler. Mr. Ferguson.
Here.
Mr. Shaw.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Losaw.
Here.
Mr. Hicks.
Here.
Mr. Ward.
Here.
Mr. O'Brien.
Here.
Mr. Haff.
Here.
Mr. Campbell. Mr. Skelly.
Here.
Mr.
Campbell's Hogan?
here.
Mr. Wilson.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mrs. Clary. Here. Mr. Griffith.
Here.
Mr. Roselle.
Here.
We have everyone.
Good. Thank you. We have everyone. Introduction of the resolution.
I'm going to read the special meeting notice first.
Yep. I'm sorry, we gotta read that, just 1 second, so we need the, reading of the special meeting. I apologize.
By letter dated April 17th, 2020, you are hereby directed to call a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors for Friday, May 1st, 2020, to be held via teleconference at 10 a.m. for the following purpose. 1, update board on county operations. 2, other such business that may properly come before it. Sincerely, Samuel J. Hall, Chairman.
And we have an introduction of a resolution.
Chairman, I introduce resolution number 140.
Resolution number 140 by Supervisor Clary, titled to appoint Amy Gonzalez to the SUNY Adirondack Board of Trustees.
Second.
We have a second?
Second.
Mr. Shaw. Second, we have, Mr. Ferguson. Any other seconds? Mr.
Second.
Henke? Mr. Rozell? Right, any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, at this point, we'll do a roll call vote, please. Yep.
Mr. Hanky?
Yes.
Mrs. Fedler? Must be muted.
She muted it, too.
Mr. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Losaw?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Half?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Skelly?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Clary?
Yes.
Mr. Griffith?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mrs. Fedler, are you unmuted now?
Now I am. Somebody unmuted me there. Yes.
All right, are you? Yes, okay. The resolution is adopted, 4,260 yes.
Thank you. We will now do update on county operations, starting with Tim Hardy on the COVID-19.
Good morning, everybody. Just a quick update of our county response to COVID-19. So we have the current coronavirus information site at washingtoncountyny.gov/coronavirus is updated multiple times a day with all of our local statistics and county operations information as that changes. The e-newsletter goes out once a day in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock, depending on the time we get everything together. And that includes all the local links to the CDC, the Department of Health, and anything else as far as updated information regarding coronavirus. We're still conducting our briefings for local officials and first responder leadership twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays at 3 p.m. New York State on pause is still in effect through May 15th. The governor's decision on schools is expected today, is what we're being told. The county state of emergency remains in effect until May 13th, and the executive order from the chairman remains in effect until May 15th, unless either are rescinded before. The updated distribution on the cloth face coverings, we held the event here on Sunday, and we distributed over 8,000. And the town of Greenwich and their fire department did a distribution. They did over 1,800 a couple of days ago. The village of Cambridge has one coming up with the town of Cambridge, town of White Creek, town of Jackson together down there that they're doing at the Cambridge school. And let's see, I believe we have another one else that's coming up as well. We are still doing pickup by appointment only at the office for anybody in your communities who's in need of that. The town of Easton was the other one on Monday. So just an update on the quick statistics on what we're looking at. Our PUIs, mandatory-wise, are 173 with 5 precautionaries. Our confirmed COVID-19 positives are up to 135, of which 29 of those are nursing home residents. We do have 1 hospitalized. We have 6 PUI COVID-19 positive deaths to date, 662 released, and 1,017 have been tested to date. Just a couple of notes on one other event that's actually coming up other than the cloth face coverings, which we are expecting an additional shipment. So if any of our municipalities are looking for any of those, please reach out to us. We can get them to you as soon as we get some additional. The Salvation Army of Glens Falls, the Tri-County United Way, the Washington County Fair, and the Regional Food Bank are partnering up together. Gina Cantanucci-Mitchell is leading the volunteer front on the county's end, so a big shout out to her for that. Thursday, May 7th at the fairgrounds, they're going to have a drive-through food pantry down there from 11 a.m. until supplies last. So Gina, and there'll be a number of volunteers on hand, will be down there. We'll have some other things too down there at that. So unless anybody has any questions or anything, that's all I have.
Any questions of Tim? Yes, Dana. Supervisor Hack.
I'm sorry, it took me a second to unmute. Tim, I'd like to know some information about the mortality rate in Washington County. If I do my math right, we basically have 1 death per 10,000 citizens, or population-wise. So that is 0.001%. Is that correct?
Based on the statistics as of this morning, yes, we have six deaths so far, so 60,000 residents.
How does that compare? I know that we are in the Capital District Economic Region, which concerns me because that lumps us in with Albany, Schenectady, as far as us reopening. Do we have any input as to Washington County maybe being a little bit different than Albany County?
Patty, are you on? She's muted.
Maybe that'll be discussion for the end. Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Still muted.
I think he's
muted.
He's muted. Chris, you got your phone there so you can dial and ask him to unmute?
What can I help you with, gentlemen? I think I'm back.
Now you're good.
Okay, Al, your update, please.
So the only thing that I had for the board was that we've got the annual report filed. And I've emailed out to all the supervisors the balance sheets so that you had some initial financial information, because I don't know when I'll be able to do my formal presentation to you. General fund finished right where we projected it would be at 15.5. But remember, out of that 15.5, we appropriated 2.6 going into this year. Just something to keep in mind. The funds that we will be talking about in depth as soon as we can have some serious conversations will be county road machinery and carpool. We told you last year there was a problem. The problem has not gotten better. And for carpool, it's actually gotten worse, to the point where we've asked the DPW superintendent not to order her carpool cars yet. The $300,000 that's in the budget is not in the fund. So we're going to need to take a serious look at probably all of our big equipment purchases moving forward for the rest of the year. But we'll have more conversation about that as we can get together, whether it's in person or virtually, in the near future. I don't have a lot of substantial hardcore numbers yet related to COVID. I will have, probably before this meeting's over, a measurement of the overtime on this payroll. The first payroll was 157,000. The second payroll was 152,000. So I don't expect this one to be any smaller, and if anything, it might be a little bit larger. If the number comes in while we're meeting, I will raise my hand and report that out to you. Sales tax, unfortunately, the sales tax, I can't give you a real handle on yet because of the lag in the deposits. So it will probably be end of May, beginning of June, before we actually start seeing the difference in our sales tax deposits. I know that doesn't give you warm and fuzzies right now, but that's how it is. And we'll know more then. Unless there's any specific questions, that's pretty much where I am right now.
Any questions for Al? Okay.
Yes.
Next report we have would be, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Al, to put a warm and fuzzy spin on what you just said about sales tax, that means with the timing for the towns, we won't be too bad off as for next year, or as for what we will actually take in on next year's budget. Am I correct?
Right. So remember, your measurement period is August 1st to July 31st. So the impact on the towns for the 2021 distribution will be minimal. It will be the 2022 that you will probably see any kind of substantial hit if there's going to be one.
So there was a little good news there.
Okay, any further questions?
Not so much a question, but Al, thanks for the recommendation on, what to hold off on. Some other things to consider is as we do triage on the budget for this year, we're going to have to make some pretty hard decisions. I know the budget committee is going to have to look at that. And there's some things that I know we probably wanted to do, but we're just not going to be able to get there. So, and we probably don't want to trim around the edges. We're probably going to have to look at some big projects that may have to wait a year. So just something for everybody to consider.
And when we start dialing into some of the committee meetings, sir, that we will definitely have some serious conversations, and there's going to be some things that people are uncomfortable with, but they're going to be necessary.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Anyone else?
Yes,
Any other
I have a
comments,
question for Al.
questions?
I have a question for Al.
Yes. Supervisor Hicks.
Al, so on our 2020 budget, the number we get from the county regarding our sales tax should be fairly static. The number that you'll give us we'll use this fall for our 2021 budget, you think will have a little bit of an impact on it, but the one after that will be the worst one?
2022, sir, yes.
But 2020 should be relatively fixed, right?
2020 has already been determined, yes.
Gotcha. And 2021, we'll see a little hit, and probably in a couple of months, you might give us an idea roughly on the percentage of that hit.
Right. You figure it's $70,000 hit to the towns for every $1 million we lose. So just kind of put that in perspective.
All right. Thank you, Al.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, one thing.
Yeah. Supervisor Henke.
Going back to carpool, Al.
Yes, sir.
This year in our pause here, we aren't getting any carpool income at all because we aren't using the cars. Probably we also aren't getting a whole lot of repair for the same reason or fuel usage. How's that coming out in the balance? Is carpool bankrupt or are we still okay?
But depends on your version of okay. Depending on some of the decisions that the board makes in the next couple of months, you're either going to have to do some things very differently in carpool, or you're going to have to infuse it with some money. That's the reality.
Okay. So it's not static.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hankey.
So it's not, we're not in a state of static. We're still bleeding in carpool.
Yeah, and as you said, without the cars being utilized, other than, maybe the public health nurses and their COVID response miles, there's really you know, there's going to be some deficits in carpool that are going to exacerbate an already existing problem.
Okay.
Supervisor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The comments that was made earlier about the 2020 budget, that we're not really desperate with that. It's, the impact would be in 21 and 22. I'd just like to make the point that for us to be able to deal with 21 and 22, we would really want to be cautious. And if there's any place to save money in 2020 budget to help us through 21 and 22, we want to be looking at that very closely. Otherwise, it could be really difficult decisions that'll have to be made later on.
Mr. Shaw, that conversation.
I've discussed this with Al, and we both feel that needs to be made very clear to everyone.
Mr. Shaw, the earlier conversation was in regards to sales tax distribution only.
Oh, I know, Al, but it wasn't your comments. There was comments of the supervisors after you that said that we're looking pretty good for 2020. I'm just cautioning everybody that if we are very cautious in our spending this year, or conservative even, that it's going to help us in 21 and 22.
Dan, my question was
Thank you, Supervisor Shaw.
the town's distribution, not the county distribution. I was asking about the town distribution.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? If not, we will move on to Laura. Your picture dropped off the screen. I don't know if you're still there or not. Laura Chadwick?
Unmute.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you're muted there.
There you go.
Very good. Thank you, Laura. Do you want to do your presentation and information on the grievance board and grievance process, please?
On the Board of Assessment Review training that was supposed to be held on April 22nd, of course, that was canceled. New York State has been given an extension for all Board of Assessment Review training to extend till next year, May 1st. So that's what we're going to do in Washington County. I sent a memo out to all reappointed board members regarding this, and any newly appointed board members, Board of Assessment Review members received a packet from my office that included all the information in there. Told them to give me a call. Of course, I'm able, either if I'm not in the office, able to get the voicemails they leave me. Most towns have the tentative assessment rules printed. They are down the security guard in lobby B entranceway. He's been very helpful in having people pick them up. Majority of them have been picked up at this point. We had 3 towns that are extending their assessment timeline, and that is Salem, Jackson, and Kingsbury. But all of the other rolls have been printed and are ready to be dispersed as of today, May 1. We will be updating the ImageMate online site for the tentative numbers, and the assessment rolls will be posted on the county website. Also, a memo will go to all the towns, either your town clerk, the supervisor, whoever we've sent the memo to before, about posting the town assessment roll on your town website. If you have a town website, by law, you're supposed to post it. If you don't, it just defaults to the county. But we do post everyone's assessment rolls on our county website. So we're up to, our normal timeline like they normally would run under regular conditions. So if anybody has any questions.
Laura?
Yes.
Any questions, anyone?
Yes, Cassie?
This is Cassie. If we do have a website, would it cover us to just refer to look at the county website for the assessment roll?
It's supposed to, if you want to put a note on your main page at this point to refer to Washington County website, that is a possibility. I know in the past, they've always said if you have a town website, the roll to be posted is, a link to the roll. So you can put the link right to the county website, which is what Heather will be sending to everybody on how to post that. So you should at least have a link there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing no further questions, thank you, Laura, we appreciate that.
You're welcome, Sam.
Before we
and
move on
board.
to Chris and his and his report, I do have a report that was submitted by the Commissioner Allen of the Board of Elections, and she just wanted to inform all of us that there will be no primaries, and that will result in about a $60,000 savings within that department. So there's some information regarding what the expense would have been. It may be more than that, but she feels comfortable at least a $60,000 savings with the 2 primaries not being conducted. Is there any question? If not, then we will move on
Sam,
to
I have a question.
County Administrator Chris.
Sam, I have a
Yeah, I'm
question.
sorry.
So there's no presidential
Yes.
primary. Are there also no state primaries, Senate primaries, assembly primaries? There's going to be no vote in Washington County on June 23rd?
That's correct. That's based on the fact that one of the candidates that filed against, the only candidate filed against Dan Stepp, who's running for the Senate, did not have enough sufficient signatures, and therefore he wasn't on the line, and he has taken it to court, but indications are it's not going to be accepted by the court.
Okay, thank you very much.
You are welcome. Thank you. Any further questions? If not, then Chris, it's your turn.
Okay. Before I get into the operational update, I just want to piggyback on what the chairman was just talking about. So it was good news for us that the combined state and federal primary on June 23rd got canceled. I also got notified last night on a call with the county administrators that as part of the very first federal stimulus to the COVID-19 response, the CARES Act, as they refer to it, New York State was given $26.4 million under the kind of program rubric of the HAVA grant, the Help America Vote Act that we had way back when. And I got the distribution formula last night, and it looks like we will be getting just over $70,000 from the federal government to support our elections. So there will be a roughly $60,000 savings from the avoided primary, and then we should be able to use the $70,000 to offset almost, if not all, of the local costs to operate the presidential primary in November, depending somewhat on what that election looks like. The proposal that the governor had out there for how we were going to operate the June 23rd primary, where the Board of Elections was going to mail out an absentee application to every registered voter and then provide absentee ballots to everybody that sent the application back, and also operate the polls, is the most expensive option available. So if that is how he wants us to proceed for the November general election, there will be significant additional costs associated with that. But between the defrayed costs of the omitted June primary and the additional federal funding, we will be under budget in that. So that is a little bit of good news. Moving on, I'll give you a brief operational update. So since we've spoken last, not much has changed in terms of county operations. What we have done in hearing feedback from the board and from the public, the county clerk was successful in working out with her staff to bring in 2 DMV clerks a few days a week. And what she started doing was there was some envelopes that had been mailed in. There were checks that needed to be processed that were kind of caught in the lurch when we shut down as abruptly as we did at the beginning of this. So they have processed through the mail work and the backlog work and are now accepting some dealer work. The thought being that depending on how long the governor tells us to stay in this operational stance, we could conceivably get, have residents drop things off in the drop box that we have outside of Building B entrance and be able to at least do some processing in DMV to try to eliminate whatever large backlog there might be when we get back to quote-unquote normal operations. With a similar end in mind, the discussion was that it would be very problematic for our local contractors if, when they were able to resume work again, our code enforcement office was hit with a backlog of inspections and applications, and when contractors were finally able to go back to work, they had to wait several weeks to get a permit. So what the code enforcement administrator has been able to do is to start taking applications that people can drop off or submit electronically. However, he's working that out. The applicant contacts their code enforcement officer for their territory and works out the best way to get them the plans and the application. That way, the quote-unquote office work is being done right now while there isn't supposed to be a lot of construction going on, so that hopefully, again, when that industry is able to reopen, we're not facing a large backlog, and these contractors and businesses can get back to work as expediently as possible. Now, so we have additional staff in the building for DMV. Code enforcement officers are working remotely, but just because of how long we've been in this operational stance and looking that it's likely to continue for at least a little while, we've also increased the operational stance of buildings and grounds. So for a while, we had the night supervisor coming in and doing some very limited cleaning and garbage collection and that kind of thing. The superintendent of buildings and grounds has increased that so that now each building, the law enforcement center, the annexes, and the main campus has a cleaner coming in at night, doing a deeper clean than was able to be done with one staff member. The idea trying to be to hit the hard common touch surfaces, especially over in the jail and in Annex 1 with public health, because those are our two, highest level of staffing currently. So Matt is doing his best with his staff to address those. As we spoke about last time we met, this is also unfortunately spring cleanup and the grass is starting to grow. So Matt also has been bringing in some of his regular day crew at normal times to start to do some of the landscaping and outside work that needs to be done. We also have a couple court projects going on, and unfortunately, because of the way the budget years match up, we needed to get those wrapped up. So I believe that the biggest project that we have over in Building C under the courts is just about complete at this point. Also operationally under the courts for a very long time, we have provided what they call court attendants. These are usually retired individuals. They are not court security like the individuals you see out front by the magnetometer. Instead, these are people who usually sit in the waiting rooms, escort people to and from court. We have a contract between the Office of Court Administration and the Sheriff's Office for the provision of these services. Without notice, the state across the board, and I did speak to my colleagues last night about this has been everywhere, the state has canceled that contract. So we'll be kind of working with the sheriff and with courts to try to make sure they are covered where they need to be covered, but that contract is no longer in place for us to provide that service. And then Superintendent of Public Works is here to discuss in more detail, so I won't go into anything about DPW currently. I know that's a topic that the board wants to talk about. There are a lot of issues there with how we bring them back and whatnot, so we'll get to that later with Deb. Before I move on, are there any questions on current operational update?
Supervisor Campbell.
I'm good. It's a nice update.
Okay, so having heard none, the next one I will give you is a brief update on, and it dovetails in with the operational update. So we had a meeting yesterday with Mr. Henke, Chairman Hall, and some of the team here regarding our FEMA application for federal funding assistance for our COVID-19 response. So Tim, Glenn, and Al have gone in and created our portal with FEMA, which is the method that we're going to receive. We'll submit our plan and our application and then get funding back through. The DHSES representative from the state, who was kind of our in-between, had reached out to Al and I earlier in the week. Following our meeting yesterday morning, Tim, Glenn, Al, and I gave that gentleman a call to ask a question that I think is of importance to the board. And that question was whether we would be eligible for FEMA reimbursement for the hazard pay. And so what we, as I'm sure everybody's aware, we're paying time and a half to anybody who physically reports to their workstation while we're under the emergency closure stand. We spoke several times to our DHSES rep yesterday about this. He was elevating it up the food chain. And what it came down to was that the federal disaster declaration was made on March 20th. And so the answer from the state and from the federal government was that if we had a policy on the book that authorized hazard pay under this situation prior to the federal disaster declaration of March 20th, it would be eligible for reimbursement. If you search your memory banks, you may remember that we passed a resolution on March 18th that authorized the compensation scheme during an emergency closure pursuant to the emergency closure plan that was offered to the board that day. So because of that action, all of the incremental cost for the hazard pay that we are paying people is eligible for FEMA reimbursement, was the determination that we received yesterday from DHSES. So what we did last night was the clerk of the board provided me with a certified copy of that resolution. Tim went ahead and uploaded it into our portal. It can be reviewed by the state. But we were given pretty strong assurances yesterday that that incremental cost, so that was what the treasurer was referring to when he said it was $157,000 for the first payroll, $152,000 for the second payroll. I'm expecting this payroll to be a little bit over $160,000 would be my back of the envelope number, but Al will get you the real number at some point. So that cost, just the extra half-time on top of the normal salaries, will be eligible for FEMA reimbursement. Are there any questions on that before I get into the next topic?
I had a question, Sam.
Yes, Supervisor Hicks.
That incremental cost, that was only for hourly employees, right, Chris?
I'm sorry, what was that, Mr. Hicks? I lost you there.
That $157,000, that incremental 50% extra, that was for hourly employees, correct?
Correct, yes.
And going forward, if we do bring back more people that we pay at time and a half, it'll continue to be eligible, correct?
Correct, because the policy is in place and it was in place before the disaster declaration.
All right, and meaning that it's eligible doesn't guarantee we're gonna get all of it. We could get a percentage of it if that's what they decide, but at least it's not eligible, correct?
Correct, and the way the funding was described to me, at least, is that it's kind of dichotomous. It's either it's eligible or it's not. So I don't think that we'll get a percentage funding of it. But I guess that is certainly a possibility. But that wasn't the way it was explained to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions on that subject for Chris?
Okay, so if not, the last thing that I wanted to talk to the board about was, and before I hand it over to the Public Works Superintendent, just to update you on where we are on the planning process for bringing employees back to work. So I had a call with all of my colleagues last night, and the other counties are just in the last 2 or 3 days starting to convene staff task force to put together reopening plans with the fact that they're seeing the May 15th light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. We've been working on this for about 3 weeks. It is considerably more complicated than I had initially anticipated. So I'll just walk through some of the issues that we're dealing with so you're kind of up to speed on where we are. The first issue is going to be when we come back. As Mr. Haff alluded to earlier, we have been placed into the capital region as the governor has broken up the state into regions to do a regional reopening. We are in the capital region, which means we are with Saratoga, Warren, Rensselaer, Albany, and Schenectady County. My indications from the second floor is that we will not be in the first wave to reopen on May 15th, but that, of course, remains to be seen. So we are progressing as though we are going to, and then we will have a plan in place, and if the governor delays our opening, we will just be that much more prepared. So some of the things that we're thinking about are how do we safely get employees into the building? So that goes to building access and staggered shift times. And why that becomes important is that our Our preferred method, what we're looking at in the plan, is to take temperatures and do symptom checks of every employee when they enter the building. Now, to that end, about 2.5 weeks ago, I was able to order 35 of the infrared thermometers so that you don't have to touch anybody and you can take a forehead temperature. Those were supposed to be delivered Thursday of last week. Unfortunately, what we were told by the supplier when they didn't show up is that they were confiscated by customs. So we have a new batch coming from China, and they've been split into 7 packages to hopefully get through customs. Currently, we do not have, nor can we obtain, adequate number of thermometers to do temperature checks before employees enter the building. Patty was kind enough to modify a CDC form for us so that we have a symptom checklist. And what we're looking at right now, I've spoken to a number of department heads that would likely be department heads and or division directors type deputy directors that will be taking temperatures and logging symptoms for every employee when they enter the building. But because of this, the larger departments, DSS in particular, the number of employees who normally report to work at the same time pose a significant issue as far as trying to maintain social distancing as we do that temperature check and symptom check for each employee. So what we've discussed is a staggered start time. So instead of most people or all of DSS reporting at 8 o'clock, we would likely start at 7:30. Have one wave report at 7:30, one at 7:45, one at 8, one at 8:15, one at 8:30, and then subsequently that would elongate the day, and people would be staying until 4:30, 4:45, 5, 5:15, 5:30, however late it is for us to get people safely in the building. An issue that we don't have great guidance on right now and is particularly of concern for Department of Motor Vehicles and DSS is the handling of paperwork. There was some initial CDC guidelines that the virus can survive for a certain period of time on paperwork. So I've been working with Tim and Glenn to try to make sure that we have enough gloves for employees to be able to take paperwork from the public with gloved hands. But as Patty can speak to far more articulately than I, there are significant concerns with the proper use of gloves. And the donning and doffing therein, and would you change them in between every piece of paper? So those are issues that we need to work through for those particular departments that are public facing and handle a lot of paperwork. That would also be pistol permits over in the sheriff's office. We're awaiting guidance. We're hearing there may be some more coming on actual workplace preventative measures that we can put in place, specifically plexiglass, partitions. If we use DMV as an example, and the clerk has mentioned this, could we open every other counter instead of trying to reopen all the counters? Because if the counters are next to each other, we can't keep the clerks nor the public that are at those counters 6 feet apart. Simple things we can do, like putting duct tape on the carpet to mark out 6-foot increments in line to try to maintain that social distancing. So those are some of the things that we're working through. And as we develop a plan for each department on the physical office space and what may or may not need to be done, we will need some lead time to either procure or construct those modifications or partitions that need to be put in place and get them put in place before we try to ramp up on staffing. Also in line with that, as I mentioned, the public coming into DMV and coming into DSS and OFA and some of our other public-facing departments, we will have an enforcement issue of trying to maintain social distancing among the public who are in the building. The employees becomes somewhat easier, but the public is certainly more of a challenge. And so I don't know if that means deputies or how we do that. That's still an issue that we're trying to work through as far as how, do we necessarily want our everyday staff trying to enforce social distancing, or is that something that we have dedicated staff to do? How do we handle that? What does that look like? That's something we're trying to work through. There are even some counties who are screening members of the public who enter the building and taking their temperatures and symptoms. I think in my conversations with Roger that may be highly problematic, and I don't know that we'll go that route, but that is something that people are doing. We'll also want to put in place a contingency plan of, rather than be reactive, what we've tried to do from the start of this is be proactive. So before we were to, drastically increase our operational stance, we want to have a plan in place for what do we do if and when an employee tests positive? What is our quarantine procedure? What's our cleaning procedure? How do we handle that? What does that do to us operationally? That is a little more complicated than you might think in certain departments. In certain departments, it's quite straightforward. In other departments, it's fairly complicated. So we're trying to put that in place. In addition, we will, if we were to bring more staff back, we're going to need more PPE, more masks. Again, gloves may become an issue if that's how we handle the paperwork sort of thing. So we just want to make sure that we have adequate PPE supplies on hand before we do anything of that nature. Okay, I think that was most of the issues that we're currently working through as far as a reopening plan. Are there any questions, inputs, comments, concerns from the board on that?
Supervisor Campbell. Yes,
Yeah,
Brad.
Chris, going with the gloves, why, I'm thinking DMV specifically now here. I guess I would go the plexiglass both ways. I would do the whole front where the people are, and I would do in between our people that are working, because as we know, it's an overstressed area, even in great times. Forget about the situation we're in now. But what I'm thinking about is, like, when we're talking about the gloves, I rented a piece of equipment from Advanced Rental out in Queensbury back maybe 2 weeks ago. It was very interesting how they handled it. Everything was placed on a clipboard. You had to stand back and grab the clipboard back and forth. Every time they got something from you, they sanitized their hands and sent it back to you. And then even the credit card got sanitized on the way through. And I'm thinking, we have a lot of sanitizer. Why do the gloves? We could come to that regimen where we sanitize everything. And because I believe the sanitizer, if it's the right alcohol content, would kill anything that would be on it. It would do the same with the paperwork. I mean, it's a little concerned that the paperwork gets soaked. I get that. But it was very interesting, and everything that I handled was fine. And I was like, wow, I've never seen anyone go to that extreme, but that must be the way essential businesses are being treated. And I think if we did that in DMV, wouldn't be all bad. I had another radical idea on DMV. Originally was more like just the tents for testing, the same type ordeal where people never come in. You use the driveway, and I think you have to be by the DMV part is the worst part, or I'd even do it over at the school. But could our own people walk back and forth inside, and those people never even come in, and you just have a tent, you do their work, anything that has to go inside goes inside, and we're good that way. It's a little radical, but just thinking outside the box since it's my department, and, trying to figure ways to do it. And then the other thing would be, if we do that at DMV, should we also have plexi across the front of the county clerk's area?
Yep, so we did install plexiglass on the front of DMV prior to the closure when this first got started. And yes, when we opened the county clerk's office to the public, I think we have to put plexiglass across hers as well. And yes, that was one of the departments I had in mind when I was talking about plexiglass partitions between our own workforce and DMV as well. Yep.
Any other questions for
How
Chris?
about the sanitizer and the
Supervisor
gloves?
Clary.
So the sanitizer is something that we have talked about. My concern would be if you've ever used, especially that sanitizer, for any prolonged period of time, it is brutal on your hands. And so the volume of customers that the DMV clerks see, if every time they pass paper back and forth, they had to sanitize their hands, honestly, I know this sounds kind of weird, but I'm concerned that their hands are really going to suffer from that. So that was why I was hoping there might be a good way to do the gloves. But again, as Patty or anybody in the healthcare field can explain to you, the gloves themselves are very problematic. So you're right that we may have to go the sanitizer route. I was trying to find something that might be a little less physically impactful for the clerks, but that is certainly an option. Yes, you're right.
Supervisor Clary?
Is there a chance to do
Chris,
both,
in the
Chris?
reopening,
Maybe, yeah.
in the reopening, looking at what we've already done, which is CSS and Meals on Wheels and like the correctional facility, they're already dealing with the public, pretty much. People are compliant and using masks and gloves and doing the things they need to do. Keep these so-called, like like Meals on Wheels.
Yeah.
They go and they go and deliver meals to 15 people. And each time they change their gloves, do they wear their mask? Are people doing this?
Yes. So, but the caveat with that would be is that our employees are free about it. Now, that is another thing that I was scheming about last night, was that there may be an addition to the employee handbook if we were to bring more employees back, to have a policy about the use of face masks in appropriate situations, so that we have a policy to back up our department heads if they have an employee who, let's just say there's an employee who wears glasses, and the mask fog up your glasses, they get annoyed, they wear it down around their neck. We might need a policy to back up the department heads when they require that employee to wear the mask appropriately. And so far, our employees have been great. They've done absolutely everything we asked them to do. My major concern is the public. We start bringing in the adults again. Right now, we are bringing public into the DESS lobby, but we're doing it one at a time, very controlled environments with a deputy right there to help make sure that things are under control. My concern becomes when things start to open up to more of a normal stance, and we've got large amounts of public in the building, it becomes much more difficult. So that's what we're trying to do.
Sam?
Thank you, Sue. Is there anyone else? Any questions? Yes.
Yes, Sam?
Yes,
This
Dave.
is just something popped
Yes,
in my
Supervisor
mind.
Brad.
This just popped in my mind with the handling of a lot of different pieces of paper. You're gonna not only handle it when it goes to the clerk and DMV circumstance, but they're gonna be handling that paper several times from there on in, and multiple people are gonna handle that paper. If I remember the process they take, I don't know, multiple people, at least 2 or 3 people are gonna handle it from then on in. Is there a way, and just throw this out for a thought process, is there a way to set up a scanning process where we could have some scanners in there, would scan the piece of paper directly to the clerk? And may eliminate a lot of this gloves and sterilizing the paper and doing other things. It's just a thought, but I think the amount of paper they're gonna handle, that trying to sterilize a piece of paper every time they pass from one place to another place could be quite complex and time consuming. Just a thought.
We can reach out to the IT department and see what's doable, Dave, and see what we need to do that. That might be a good direction to attempt, Chris, if we can, because the other issue we're gonna have with the paper is if we go outside, as Supervisor Campbell had expressed, or people coming in and having to wait outside, what if it's bad weather? Stuff is gonna get all wet and the ink's gonna run, and so we need to have a better way to do it if we can. And that may be something we can explore with the IT department and see, Dave. Thank you for the suggestion.
And the other part is that the county clerk will be handling documents with multiple pieces of paper. Is there a way, I know we do partial submissions right now with paper to electronically, especially on closings and e-filing. But is there a way we can expand that so that people will be required to email their documents to the county clerk versus coming in to handle those documents over and over again? Just another thought.
We can check that also. We can check that also, Supervisor Brad. Supervisor Happ.
Talking about sanitizing paper, if everyone remembers back when anthrax, there was that scare that people were sending anthrax through the mail. The solution for that was throw your mail in a microwave oven. Doesn't get hot enough to cook the paper, but it gets hot enough to cook the little organism. I'm wondering if we have, 50 pieces of paper that need to be sanitized in the DMV, get a college microwave, throw it in the microwave for however long, I don't know how long, a minute, And then you've got all those papers are sanitized. And once it's in the building, I guess you can consider it will remain clean. I think it's just the interaction between the public and the employees you're working out. But I think it'd be interesting to see if maybe a microwave oven is a good way to sanitize large volumes of documents. Thank you.
We can explore that as well, Supervisor Haff, thank you. Any other ideas, suggestions, or comments? Patty Hahn, would you like to comment on some of the safety issues here, the medical aspects of what we're discussing?
Oh, she doesn't have a mic.
I guess not now because she doesn't have a mic. I apologize. I thought she was live with us, but she's not. So, Chris, did you have anything before you all done? Any other questions to Chris before he passes it on to Deb? Okay. Deb, I believe you're up.
So the DPW has worked together, and we think we've come up with a good plan for working at 50% for a couple of weeks. But we're struggling with how to implement the plan or with a policy on like what's going to be required of us. Can we put 2 guys in a truck? Can we put 4 guys in a truck? So we're kind of looking for direction with that.
That, I believe, we're going to have to check out with Patty on. As I said, we believe she was going to be on, but she doesn't have the connection here for whatever reason. Yeah.
Okay. So what should I do? Should I wait until we get this policy, or should we go forward? I don't want to really send them out there without knowing what we're going to do as far as taking their temperature and if we're going to require that, or if we're going to sanitize the vehicles at certain intervals, or, you know, should I work with the Department of Health on what we should do with that?
Yes, I worked with the Department of Health on that aspect of it, and then we'll get that resolved prior to them actually going back to work. What was the date we were looking at? It was next week, correct? Not Monday, but the week after?
Right, so, thank you, Chairman. What I was getting from the board the last time we met, and based on some comments that have occurred since, is that there was a desire from the board to see DPW back to work. If that's the case, then in my conversations with Deb and other folks, I think the earliest we could safely do that would be Monday the 11th. And right now, one of the big things that we're waiting on is those thermometers, because without those, we have no way to check symptoms or check temperatures. As everybody's aware, we don't have any testing that is available to us, so there's no way that we can do the kind of regular periodic testing that has been talked about all over the place. So, and not necessarily that would be appropriate, I'm just saying that that's not an option for us. So the least invasive, lowest hanging fruit as far as trying to be able to assess the health of the employees as we bring them back to work is the temperature and the symptom check. And currently, we don't have the equipment to do the temperature check. If the board would like DPW back to work, which is kind of the assumption that we're operating under, then we have some logistic stuff that we have to do as far as working with them, establishing the schedules, getting them to buy into that, getting the appropriate PPE and the cleaning supplies out to all the barns and everything. So in conversations with Deb and others, we felt that the 11th would be a feasible target to get them back to work at 50%, with giving us enough time to put the proper precautions in place. So I guess one of the questions would be, is that the will of the board that we try to get DPW back? That was what we were hearing.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Darrell Wilson.
Yeah, Supervisor Wilson.
So, yeah, I agree. It's a good discussion. I do know that, as part of an essential business up here in the north end of the county, there's a lot of protocols we can put into place to minimize the risk and to help prevent any spread. Certainly having some of the equipment you mentioned, Chris, is good. We don't want to rush to failure. Let's list out some of these protocols we think are prudent, and kind of get them out on paper so we can all look at them. Example, do 2 people ride in the truck? if that is a requirement for safety, the safe operation of whatever equipment we're working with, like wintertime, obviously a plow truck or a wing person. But during the summer, do we really need that? But if you do, okay, they have to wear masks and they have to wear gloves and they have to clean the inside of the cab and all the surfaces they touch before and after they use it. So you can lay out a whole bunch of protocols that make sense. It might slow us down. We may not be very efficient, but we can assure the best of our ability to make that workday safe for everybody going forward. So yeah, let's not rush to failure. Let's put something on paper and get it out and we can all look at it. Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Wilson. Supervisor Haff.
I've heard that we have kind of an excess amount of cars available. Could we have cars at each barn so that we don't have to have 4 guys in a truck? You know, you can put one guy in the front seat of a carpool, one guy in the back seat. You could have 2 people that way, but I think that might be an interesting way to solve the congregation within one vehicle problem. I'm all for coming back at 50%. Weeks ago, I said we should be at 100%. I'll take half of that if I can. My question is the 50% that comes back, are they going to be paid at time and a half during straight time? Thank you.
So under the current policy that is in place, yes, if you brought 50% of the workforce back, the 50% that is reporting to work would be paid at time and a half for those hours worked. And so because DPW is a union shop, one suggestion that has been floated would be kind of splitting your workforce into Team A and Team B, for lack of a better term. And Team A would work 3 days the first week of a pay period, 2 days the second week of a pay period. Team B would work 2 days the first week of the pay period and 3 days the second week, so that each of your platoons of employees or teams is working 5 days during a regular 10-day pay period, so that everybody is receiving the same amount of overtime, or hazard pay, not overtime, I'm sorry, because it's straight time to your point, Mr. Haff, but receiving the same amount of hazard pay, so that we are not discriminating, we're not choosing favorites, everybody's making out the same. But then, and to Mr. Wilson's point, that heightens the need for the cleaning and the decontamination of the vehicles and the tools, because you're going to have your groups overlapping in quick proximity to one another. So you're going to want to make sure that you've done your darndest to decontaminate, disinfect those hard surfaces where that virus might live from one shift to the next, so that you're not contaminating Team B if somebody on Team A ends up positive.
Chris, what would it take to end this hazard pay during straight time? Would it be simply to declare DPW as essential? And that does it? I think we're getting ourselves where we cannot afford to do this, regardless of FEMA reimbursement.
Okay, well, so 2 questions there. I'll address the first one first. In order to end the hazard pay, the board would need to rescind the resolution that was passed on March 8th. The question about affordability, I think, was certainly very pressing and germane prior to the determination that we received from DHSES yesterday. But given the fact that we have at least been told at this point that hazard pay is eligible for reimbursement, at least if everything goes the way we're told it will, then there is no cost to the county for that time and a half.
Well, we all pay taxes. That money comes from somewhere. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Sam?
Yes, whoever I couldn't see. Is that you, Dave? Dave O'Brien, Supervisor?
Yeah. So curious,
Yes,
I see the state out on the road doing a lot of work. They have several people on their crews. Have we touched base with the state to see how they're managing this? So maybe they have some ideas that would help us in our decisions to go forward. That would be a simple, well, nothing's simple anymore. that could provide some guidance fairly quickly on how they're handling some of these issues. I'm sure that the state is on top of looking at these things, and they're doing everything they can to make sure their crews are managed well. So maybe Deb, with a quick phone call to them, could find out some information to help us in this, making these decisions, and we're not trying to blaze a new trail.
So we have been in close contact with the state and talked to them at least on a weekly basis, and they're at 1/3. So if you want us to follow theirs, we could try to do a 1/3. It's just a little more difficult. We're not quite set up the same way as they are. They have their building, and I don't know exactly how many is in, say, the Hudson Falls building, but maybe 20 or 30, I don't know. And our buildings only have 4, 6, 8. So it's you know, do you want us to consider a third?
When I can escape from the house.
I think,
What I'm just going to say.
I think what Supervisor O'Brien, go ahead, Dave.
I think what I was looking at was what processes they put in place, not the number of people. But when I get the opportunity to escape from my house for a couple hours and have to go to either Glens Falls to sign papers or checks, is that I see crews of, on 149 of 6, 7, 8 people all working together. So they must have procedures and processes for their crews to come out like that. It doesn't matter how many or what percentage of their crews are working from a barn, but there are 6 or 8 people in that work area.
I'll check.
Thank you, Supervisor O'Brien. Yes, Supervisor Clary.
Chairman, I did a search on thermometers to see if I can find some, and I don't know, do we have to have a policy that has the exact thermometers? Does there are usable disposable strips, like 100 that comes in a pack? That I would able to get 100?
For the oral thermometers?
No, forehead. They run on the forehead. Not usable.
Problematic, we could use them in a pinch. There's a problem with the infrared, you can maintain the 6-foot distance while taking, or close to the 6-foot distance while taking the temperature. With the temporal scan thermometers, you have to get quite a bit closer, you have to do it appropriately, and then you have to change the guard on it. So I think kind of because we have at least until May 15th, we were hoping, right? I was gonna wait and see if this next shipment gets through. If it doesn't, then yes, the temporal scans are probably the next best thing, with the guards in place. I know that, the infrared thermometers have their drawbacks as well. You know, once it starts getting hot outside, we're gonna have employees come in the building and wait 5 minutes. Because if it's, 80 degrees out, your forehead will be that much hotter. So you're right, there are issues with that. Temporals are more accurate, but they're more problematic to have a non-medical professional administer. And at this point, we are gonna have to have just regular staff doing the temperature checks. Was why we were trying to do it.
Yeah, Chris, I'm just to give you some insight. Chris, you're spot on. We've done some testing at International Paper. We've got the heat scan, the infrareds. They're finicky. To your point, people coming in from the cold out parking lot, they're scanning in at 90 degrees. I was not alive when I walked in the building and had my temperature taken. And then you get to the temporal ones, they're more accurate. You have to get right close to the forehead. But then that's a screen, right? So then you have to have a protocol for, okay, this person is elevated. Now they got to go see a healthcare professional, so that all you're doing is diverting them off. But and then back to Deb, if she's still on, I've got some stuff on enhanced cleaning protocols and operating protocols that I can share with you if you get nothing from the state. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Supervisor Wilson, maybe you could share that with her anyways? even if she doesn't get it from the state, because it may be more beneficial in some regards?
Okay, will do.
I appreciate it, thank you. Supervisor Hicks?
Sam, I have a little different concern. I do appreciate what Daryl said regarding rush to failure. I think the 11th is a little quick. I think next week, Deb and Chris and Patty should sit down and again, put this on paper, create some kind of protocol. And I think, regarding gloves, regarding masks, regarding men in a truck, get it out to us, email it to us, let us respond back, get us to buy into it, get us some input, give us time to kind of digest it and let everybody comment on it. So when we get maybe to the 15th, when we have our next board meeting, we can all vote and approve it so they can start on the 18th. I think you're rushing it a little bit, and I think it might be a mistake to have a small group of 3 or 4 do it without all of us at least weighing in and getting the buy-in to make sure we haven't missed something. Just my 2 cents.
Okay. So Supervisor, this is a good time for me to jump in on that, okay? So right now, what I would like to do along those lines is announce when the next committee meetings are going to be scheduled and when they're going to begin. And we will start on Thursday, May 7th, and that will be Public Works and Public Safety.
Sam,
and then we'll go again on Tuesday. Yes, sir.
Sam, you realize you did that right when you
Yeah.
had the food thing in Greenwich. That kind of, a bunch of us volunteered to do that.
No, I didn't take that in consideration. We went down the calendar to get it on. Actually, what we went by was when Debbie had to have the legitimate time to post it, Matt. So we can move that to the 8th, the next day? Does that work?
Wait,
Just throw
is that a day? At what time?
Time will be, the notice will be coming out on the time, 9 o'clock. And let me go through the other one we got. The other one we got is scheduled for Tuesday, May 12th. And that would be government ops, and that would be finance. And we were looking at starting them at 9 o'clock. And the recommendation that we would have would be that the chairman of those committees come here and use this platform, if you will, to chair it from. That way, if we have any technical difficulties, we will have assistants here to maybe get somebody on. The last thing we want to do is have somebody doing it remotely from home as the chair and then have an issue and not be able to continue on with the meeting. So does that make sense to everybody? And then it would just be the chair of the committee who is reporting here. We get the meeting started from here, and then we go from there. Certainly everybody can join. We'll have all the information put out. So it'll follow the same protocol as all of our other meetings. The announcements, the posting will be done in the media. The department heads will provide information directly to Debbie as they have in the past, and it will continue on along the same lines. Any questions on that? Okay, we'll begin that information out. Along this other line, we were talking about DPW. Chairman Skelly, would you like to comment at all on that?
No, I've been in contact with Deb and I told her we've got to get this list of issues so that we can get a protocol set, and she agrees. So I think the idea of her sitting down next week with public health and getting this figured out, getting the information out to us is the best way to go. We certainly want to get things going, but we don't want to endanger crews either.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Chairman.
So Sam?
Somebody,
Dave?
yes.
So a question.
Yes.
If at DPW, I'm just throwing out an if at DPW we find that the process and procedures are acceptable to move forward, do we have to wait for a full board meeting to approve moving forward, or could the DPW start moving forward on the 11th with opening up however the structure of the DPW staff is? Just a protocol question.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. Yeah, I mean, because technically we don't have to wait to do that either way. Okay, that's a decision the chairman can make under the state emergency. All right. We are putting this out here now so we can get some guidance because we've heard it both ways. My personal opinion was, we didn't start until the governor told us we could go back. All right, however, we heard from a substantial number of supervisors, they wanted to, get the individuals out there. So, you know, we can do it either way. Trying to give Public Works the opportunity now, we are gonna have a committee meeting set there so they can weigh in on it, and then we can go from there. And we certainly will have, the opportunity for other members that are not on that committee to be at the committee meeting virtually, so they can offer any input they have, and then the chair and the committee of Public Works can make their recommendation, and we can move forward, one way or the other, whatever that may be.
Thank you, Sam.
Again, you know, this is not something that personally I am pushing for, because my preference would be till we have this thing over and we could go into a different direction. You know, so we know that we're not endangering anybody. And we don't know what's going to happen. We're in a different area as we speak right now, being things opened up on a regional basis. We don't know where the governor's going to stack us in that when he decides to make us go. So, according to Deb, and correct me if I'm wrong, Deb, the first 2 weeks was going to be taking care and mainly the maintenance of the equipment from the wintertime. And then it was going to be, the second week was going to be primarily getting ready the equipment to do the actual work that you were going to be doing. Is that semi-correct?
That's in a nutshell, perfect.
Okay. So that's what we were looking to do when we bring them back. And to start with. So is it, I guess I'll go back to Chairman Skelly. Are you comfortable with that? Is that?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. As Deb told me, you know, when we shut down, they kind of just had to leave everything the way it was. So there is some things that have to get taken care of before they get out and onto the roads.
Yeah, and hopefully, you know, we'll have to see what happens on May 15th, but, you know, the governor could throw us another curve that we aren't anticipating right now. So that's the direction we'll move.
Yeah, Mr. Roselle.
Mr. Roselle, I'm sorry, up there, yep, gotcha.
Yes, to back up Supervisor Half's question, where would we discuss the time and a half going on forward?
Yes, what's your question, John? I'm sorry.
Where would we discuss the position of the time and a half for the workers going forward?
There should be, I mean, as long as it's being reimbursed by the feds, I wasn't planning on any discussion on it because it's something that's being paid by them, and it's something that's being done because it's a hazardous situation that they're still going out to the public. You know, it doesn't mean that somebody's not going to lean out of their car and ask them directions, or they're not going to ask them things that they need to do from their perspective. They're still working with each next to each other, and no matter what we put in there as far as safeguards, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be affected by another employee who was affected by a family member, or whatever the case may be. So it's not, you know, it's not fair to really say to one group, we're going to give you the hazardous duty pay for coming in and doing your job, and saying to another one, we're not going to. That's kind of the logic we're using, John.
Okay.
Because it is reimbursable from the feds.
Is the state getting the time and a half pay also?
I don't know what the state policy is.
I don't know what their policy is in the field. I know some of them are getting time and a half, but that is office personnel, so I don't specifically know about but I can find out.
Yeah, you know, and John, in just a second, Dan, let me finish this, and I'll get you Supervisor Half. You know, I'm not so much concerned about what the state does with their employees. They're not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to the citizens of Washington County and those employees that we have here. And I'm more concerned about taking care of them than trying to follow the policy necessarily administratively, maybe what the state is doing. But that's just my personal take on it. Supervisor Half?
Yeah, so I did something in my laptop. I can't see anybody anymore, but maybe you can still hear me. Chris had mentioned that in order for DPW or other departments to come back and not be paid time and a half, we would have to rescind the emergency order. I know all policies can be amended. Various parts can be added, removed without rescinding the whole entire policy. Maybe this is a question for Roger. Why can't this be the case here?
Why can't what be the case? Paying some
That
people
we-
time and a
that
half
we-
to come in and others not?
That we amend that DPW be declared an essential department, like the sheriff department, that they be declared essential. It's not, why are we worried about fairness that we declare one department essential and the other one's not essential? If we do this, we're not going to return to work until August. We need to get back to operating the county. And I think we should amend
Yeah,
the
it's not a
policy to allow DPW to be declared essential.
Your policy doesn't indicate that certain departments are essential. It just says each department submitted a plan to operate whatever things they thought were essential and brought their folks in to do that, and the folks that came in got paid. So the only question you have here is, with the time and a half, is are you going to pay some people that and others not, or are you just going to rescind the time and a half for people that come in? We never made an essentialness determination by department.
Can you make?
You just said.
What would prevent us from specifically saying DPW can come back as an essential department where their straight time is paid as straight time, not hazard pay? To me, it sounds like we're hung up on because a policy says something. Let's make some movement, adjust the policy so that we can actually get back to work.
Well, I think you might have a negotiation issue with the union if you tried to bring them back at straight time, even by changing the policy. The first thing you're going to do is look at it and say, how come you're paying those other, not only non-union, but union staffers for, differently than we are, when that resolution says what it says, which is people that come in get time and a half, or hazard pay. I don't want to use time and a half because that's associated with overtime. So what you'd have to do is amend that resolution that says everybody but DPW, when they come in, gets hazard pay. You could do that.
Chris.
Yeah, Mr. Half, what I was hearing from your last comments was that you were concerned that the hazard pay policy was slowing the return to work from DPW. From my perspective, that's not what's occurring. We are under an order from the governor that we are mandated to reduce our staff by 50%. And so when the public works superintendent talks about bringing back half the workforce, that's our way to comply with that mandate while still maintaining safety, because we don't want anybody out there working alone. So if we've got a 4-person barn, we're going to bring in 2 people so that we've got at least a team there. But as the superintendent and the team works on bringing DPW back, the hazard pay policy hasn't slowed anything down. It's the safety protocols and those things that Mr. Wilson was speaking about that is slowing us down. It's not the hazard pay. And maybe I wasn't hearing you correctly, but that was what I was taking from your last comment.
Thank you, Chris. I lump it all together. We have extreme financial concerns. This is all, linked together at some point. At some point the shoe's going to drop and we may be stuck for all the finances to pay hazard pay. At what point do we stop hazard pay? We need to look at ways that we can effectively implement a reopening of the county. I understand it's very complex, but I see New York State DOT in the town of Hartford quite often with full crews. I would like to see how they are doing it, their concerns, and move on.
Sam, Dave.
Point taken, Mr. Half. Yes, Mr. O'Brien.
So the question is that, what does our resolution say authorizing the hazard pay and when it stops? Is there a defined date or defined time period?
No. And it was left open-ended specifically because we're waiting for the, it won't end until the federal disaster ends, till they remove the emergency.
The resolution says, resolve, the Board of Supervisors hereby endorses, this is the last resolve, hereby endorses and approves the following compensation arrangement for all county employees for the duration of an emergency closure as may be declared by the chairman of the Board of Supervisors pursuant to the county's operations emergency closure plan. And then it says, all non-essential employees shall be sent home immediately with pay. I'll find my space here. Without being required to use accrued benefit time, essential employees who are required to report to the municipal center or other county office for work shall adopt split shifts or alternating work days in order to limit the number of staff present at any one time to less than 50% of the total staff of that department or office. And then 3, hourly employees who are deemed essential by the COVID-19 response task force and are required to report to work shall be paid at the rate of time and a half for all hours worked throughout the duration of the emergency closure.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Questions? Concerns?
Sam?
Supervisor Campbell?
I wanted to go back to Deb because I don't know, Deb, I brought up the Max Force engines and the May 11th deadline is fast approaching. So I want to make sure that gets covered. And since I didn't have an agenda in front of me as to whether that was going to get covered or not, I don't know what the county's looking at on doing on that. And so I guess I don't know what Roger's probably read the letter by now and had a chance to. So I want to know what the county is doing so that our town can actually make a good decision here also. So if you guys can speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, so we didn't opt out of the class action settlement back to when it was first certified, which means that we're in the class action. It didn't make sense. We weren't going to file a separate lawsuit from the class action ourselves. So we opted to stay in to the settlement. And the way you do that is you don't do anything, basically. So now the settlement has happened, and now you have to submit a claim form. So what we're doing is compiling how many of these trucks we owned and when, and the financial information on them, and then we submit that as in the form of a claim, and we're either, I can't remember what the thing said exactly, paid a certain amount per truck or given a credit in purchasing new trucks is what I believe it says. Deb, I think, has it actually in front of her and can correct me if I'm wrong. So we're in the process, my understanding, of compiling that information so you can say I had 3 of these trucks, they were purchased during the appropriate dates, here they are, and you need the VIN, you need, all the information about what kind of truck it was, the purchase price, all that good stuff. You submit that, and then you get your claim back after you submit the information.
So we determined that there were 5 trucks that were eligible for this, and we're analyzing everything involved in it so that we can determine which of the 3 options would best benefit the county.
What was the third option, Deb?
Well,
okay.
One was to get reimbursed for amount. One was 10,000 off a new purchase, and one was just 2,500 up front.
Okay. So the third option that I didn't mention was just $2,500 a truck.
So I think that
basically
some of ours
all
may
of
have
the
cost
criteria that we're
15,000.
analyzing. What'd you say?
Say it again, Brian.
Well, I think some of them there may be 1 or 2 of them that did cost us the 15,000 already, and we'd probably go for the reimbursement. But for the most part, it sounds like if we're buying trucks anyway, we might as well get the 10,000. But if, like at our town level, if we're not ready to buy a new truck, we're smarter to just take the 2,500. I just want to make sure all the supervisors understand that their town might own one of these, and they should be looking at this. And May 11th is the day. So I'm trying to get it all out there. I would like to know what the county's doing, but as long as you're analyzing it. I'm sure you'll come to the right decision, so I'm not worried on that. I just wanted to make sure it was all out there because there's 17 towns and any one of us could have a truck. I think we have 2 actually, and I know other towns had 2, but so anybody that's involved in the conversation right now, you have 11 days. That's where I was trying to get to.
Thank you, Brian. We appreciate that. Supervisor comments. Anybody, any supervisors have any comments? Yes, Supervisor Shaw.
Yes, this question is kind of directed, I think, towards Deb and Chris, but it's about CHIP funding. I've been following that pretty close for my town. I understand all 3 funding sources are in the budget, but the budget director has final say or ruling over it. And there's been discussion that it could be 10, 15, 20% reduced if the shortfall is as significant as some are predicting. And then last week, New York State Association of Counties come out with a comment that Governor Cuomo says it might be as high as 50%. Do we have that nailed down so we know how to proceed at the town level as far as what we can depend on for funding?
So I'll take that. So the short answer is no. And here's the detail behind the bad news. So when they passed the budget on April 1st, what they did was they put a provision in there that said if the state fiscal plan during any one of the 3 monitoring periods is out of balance by more than 1%, which is roughly $1 billion in revenue, then the budget director has the unilateral authority to make cuts. And originally the way it was portrayed was cuts across the board. But unfortunately those lawyers pick little things like semicolons in there, and the language actually says cuts across the board, semicolon, or such appropriations as may be necessary to bring the financial plan back into balance. So what does that mean? So right now, the first monitoring period was April 1st to April 30th, so it ended yesterday. What we were told last night from the governor's office is that Rob Mojica, the budget director, and the governor's office is waiting for the cash report from the comptroller to see. Their forecast currently is that the state fiscal plan is out of balance by $13.8 billion. Now, that would translate to a 13 to 15% across the board cut to our state aid. Unfortunately, what it looks like he's going to do is utilize the second half of that sentence. And in order to do that, what he's going to do is he is going to exclude school aid and Medicaid funding from the across-the-board appropriations reductions. So what that does is if he did it across the board, we as counties would be looking at between 15 and 20% reduction in state aid. If he excludes school aid and Medicaid funding from those cuts, in order to make up the $13.8 to $15 billion that he needs, it translates to a 50% cut to state, or to counties, rather, I'm sorry. So for us, that'd be about $7 million from general fund we would lose. As with most things right now, there are politics in play. He changed that from a potential 20% cut to local government to 50% cut to local government following Senate Majority Leader McConnell's comments that the Senate Majority Leader did not want to have direct funding to state and county government in the next stimulus bill because he felt it was more appropriate for blue states to go bankrupt. So I think that politically and strategically what the second floor was doing was trying to ratchet up the rhetoric and do a little bit of saber rattling and saying if the federal government does not provide direct funding to states and local governments, it will be catastrophic. 50% cut to state aid will be absolutely catastrophic. I don't think it will come to that. I hope. I'm knocking on all sorts of wood here that it doesn't. But so we don't know. It could range from 20% to 50%. If in the next stimulus that apparently is being negotiated and led by the House delegation right now, there is direct funding to states and local governments. If you saw yesterday, Speaker Pelosi came out and said that she wanted $1 trillion for states and local governments over the next 3 years. Now, there's very little likelihood she'll get $1 trillion through the Senate, but if she were even able to come up with $500 billion, that would plug the state's budget hole, and the original number was only $50 billion, and it gave us $5.4 million. So if they come up with $500 billion, it would be 10 times that. We have no idea yet.
Getting back specifically to the state, the way the legislation is written is that following the ending of a monitoring period, which was yesterday for the first monitoring period, the budget director has 10 days to provide warning to the state legislature of the cuts that the governor's office and the budget director tend to implement to balance the financial plan. What nobody knows is whether that 10-day clock started today or it starts once he submits the plan to the legislature. What we were told from the second floor last night was that it's likely that they're going to wait for the cash report from the comptroller, which should be middle to end of next week, and that likely the budget director is going to provide the cut plan to the legislature in mid-May. So, to Mr. Shaw's direct question, currently CHIPS, Pave New York, and extreme winter weather are all in the budget, all funded fully at last year's level. We won't know until the middle of May whether the state is including those three funding sources in their proposed appropriation cuts to local governments to balance the state fiscal plan. So, worst case scenario, if you wanted to start using your CHIPS money, I might recommend you're safe expending 25 to 50% of your CHIPS award in the next month. Hopefully we will have more clarity around the middle of May. There is a potential that if you were to go out and spend all your CHIPS money in the next 2 weeks, you might then get notified from the state that only half of your CHIPS money is coming. So that could be problematic, to say the least. So unfortunately, like most things surrounding both the current financial picture and the state of operations, this is as clear as mud.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other supervisor comments?
Yeah, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, Mr. Campbell. Supervisor Campbell,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Chris, going by where you just went with, let's take AIM funding now. They're gonna mandate we pay, just like we did last year, the certain ones. Is it possible they would mandate us to pay the certain ones and cut the ones that they're paying?
Yes, there is. So technically there's a chance. Realistically, there's very little chance because the municipalities still receiving AIM by and large are the large upstate cities. So it's unlikely politically that he would do that. It's also unlikely when we look at the town level. I don't think he's going to cut the AIM distribution from the counties to the towns because he would raise the ire of the Association of Towns and the Association of Mayors at the expense of making us happy, and he almost never is willing to make that political trade-off. So I would anticipate that the AIM payment you get from the county will be the same. He will not reduce that. However, you do need to keep in mind that in addition to the roughly $300,000 of our sales tax that he's diverting to make AIM payments whole, he is also taking, I forget the number, I apologize, another $100,000 out of our sales tax to fund this distressed hospital fund that he created as part of emergency.
Yeah, I think it's 176, Chris.
Is that what it is? I apologize. I forget the number, but it's $50 million for the upstate counties, and it's divided by your, it's proportionate to your share of the total amount of sales tax generated by all the counties outside of New York City, divided by 50 million is what you pay. So we have the AIM payment coming out and the distressed hospital fund payment coming out, in addition to likely a significantly reduced sales tax revenue.
Okay, so can we use that to our advantage? Can we take that same formula and use it across the state for Hudson River, Black River?
Unlikely.
That would be ideal. That would be ideal.
That would be too easy, Supervisor Campbell. So, okay, are there any other comments?
Hey, you never know. You got to try somewhere.
That's for sure. I have one announcement here that the governor has directed that each state, or each county, set up a back-to-work task force. This is going to be done on a regional basis, and we don't have a lot of the information or particulars on it yet. But on Monday, I will be announcing the members of that task force. I have several members that say that they would participate, other ones that we are waiting to hear back from. But we'll have that all wrapped up on Monday so we can make that appointment. It's going to start with the first things will be the construction industry and the manufacturing will be the first things that they're going to allow to open. And there are a whole platform of procedures, if you will, that we have to entertain as they go through that process. It's going to be controlled regionally with a control center. Obviously, that probably will not be Washington County. It'll be in one of the bigger counties. Could be Albany, could be Saratoga, could be Schenectady. We don't have any of those particulars yet as to how they're going to have their oversight of the operation. But we can go ahead and we can appoint the task force and have that done so we're not behind the power curve when we reach that level. I would like to take this opportunity to also thank the supervisors for being patient throughout this process. Things are still moving ahead in the manner that we can move on a day-to-day basis with business to try to meet some of those needs that are required. A special shout out to our emergency management team, our public health nurses, our county administrator, our attorney, the clerk and the other members here, the DSS, and all the sheriff's office and all those other operations that have been on the front line here, keeping us going on a day-to-day basis and making us all safe. We certainly appreciate that. We appreciate your cooperation and support as we move this thing forward, and hopefully we'll see some light at the end of the tunnel here. Hopefully on the 15th of May, the governor will have some good news to us as far as what can be open, what we can move away from, and what we can do. My concern is, as I've stated in the past, is that we bring our employees back in a safe work environment. When we do that, we've had that charge all along. It's not just because of the COVID-19, and we have been able to manage that over the years, and I want to see that continue. So if no other supervisors have any comments, we will, Supervisor Hank. Yep, Supervisor Hanky.
One thing I think that I wanted to mention, we've had, I think we did a good thing today appointing Amy Gonzalez to the Board of Trustees. She'll be a really good addition there. She's, ex-military and small business, and she's just a good, generally, good head. She'll do well. And I also wanted to mention the local business quick response has been coming in and doing disinfecting not only for us down in public safety, but for a lot of other businesses for nothing. They're just a real good company. I think they deserve a shout out for that.
Sam?
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, we certainly appreciate it. Yeah, Dave?
I'd like to echo your thanks to you and all the staff who's been coming in so diligently and working to help get us through this process. I know it's been difficult on everyone, and we hope that we have a light at the end of the tunnel so that things can go smoothly in the future. I know we're going to have a lot of challenges in front of us, but that's what we're hired by the people to do.
Thank you, Supervisor O'Brien. And I did, yes, Kathy.
Can I make a comment?
You certainly may.
I just wanted to say, I'll take dancing. Well, I'm chairman of AG, so I have to mention AG. But I just want, while we're thinking of all these people that we have to open back up and get back to work, as we proved when we had the Washington County Ag Plan implemented, this county is supported huge with ag. And people need to realize that there's beef farmers, pork farmers, chicken farmers that have to maintain the costs for taking care of their animals, and they're losing markets on where they can put stuff and then where they can sell it or process it. You have greenhouse growers, etc. Do we invest in the money to plant the plants with whether or not they know there's even going to be a market or a place to sell the vegetables, or dairy that's dumping milk and crashing prices? I mean, we need to think about all of that as we move forward, that there's an essential group of people that have to work and spend money because they have livestock that aren't getting paid. So while we're talking about manufacturing and construction, we need to remember we're supported by a lot of ag in this county.
Absolutely, Cassie, I agree with you 100%. When I mentioned the construction and manufacturing, that is the phase that the governor has put out in his reopening of the task force. And I believe that that's what they're going to be focusing on to begin with. That doesn't mean that we certainly can't reach out to help our agricultural industries, but that's what the task force is. And that's where we're trying to get some more guidance, because maybe the emphasis is being taken for granted. This is something that's already being done, and we need some more guidance on that. But your point's well taken and appreciated. Thank you very much. The other thing I was going to say that I neglected to do was I wanted to say a thank you to our dispatchers down in the Emergency Management Center, our public safety. Those guys and gals have been working around the clock, doing a tremendous job, and they're at the heart of getting all the pressure calls that they then refer out to our emergency responders out there who are doing sensational work as well. We need to remember that within our towns. And if you get a chance, just, and I'm sure you do, a little extra pat on the back for them would be appreciated, because they really are putting their lives on the line out there, going into situations that they fully don't know what they're going to receive when they get there. So, thank you again. Is there any other further comments?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hardy might have an update on the school situation.
In fact, I believe he does.
I think he did. Okay, very good.
I think he's been listening to the governor while we've been talking.
Yeah, the governor just announced that the schools will remain closed for the rest of the academic year. The summer school session plans will be announced later on by the end of the month, according to the governor's press conference.
Thank you, Tim. So that's the latest we heard on that. Was everybody able to hear that? Is there anything else to come before the board? Yes, Supervisor Haft.
Thank you for the opportunity to beat a dead horse again. We have had
You're welcome.
we've had 6 people die, 6 residents in this county since what, maybe February, if you start counting. That is 0.001%, roughly 1 person per 10,000 population. Do we have a criteria as to what that number needs to be to rescind the emergency order? Or is it just a feeling that we have that it's okay to rescind the order?
Well, right now, we could rescind it, and then we would lose all of the aid that we have coming, which doesn't make any sense. That's number one. Number two, there are people much smarter than myself and many of us that are on here in the medical profession that are basing that decision that's given the President of the United States and the Governor of the State of New York to take a look at these things and see where we are. Our apex is just starting to hit now. So, we can expect more deaths. And again, you ask about the thing, 1 death is unacceptable to me. What we can't measure is the number of lives that have not been affected because of our decisions and because of the willingness for the people to stand back and stay covered and stop the traveling and keeping the social distancing and those types of things. All right, we'll never be able to figure out how many that was. But this virus has tentacles that reach out in areas that you may not even think they reach out to. So what we don't know is how many people have actually had the disease because they haven't been able to test everybody. And 1 life to me is 1 too many to lose if it's something we can control. Tim, did you have some things to add to that?
Mr. Haft, just a note, as the numbers continue to be updated for this afternoon, I just talked to Patty a few minutes ago, and we're going to have 23 new positives for today, only 11 of which end up being nursing home. So there still is a bit of community transmission. I mean, it all depends on as the testing comes back. Some days there are more than others, and it depends on how fast they are. So I know Patty and her team are monitoring that every day as that changes.
Well, I know I'm just looking at mortality. That's the only number you can look at. All the other numbers move, asymptomatic people, how many positives. I think you need to focus on the mortality. Now, Sam, you had mentioned that if we were to rescind the emergency order today, we would lose all that state aid. Do you mean that we would lose the state aid from the beginning until now? We have to stay in this all the way through?
No, we wouldn't, Dana. We wouldn't. We would lose from this point on. Okay?
And we, remember, the governor's order is still in effect, so we can only go to 50% pursuant to the governor's order. We couldn't fully open at this point, even if we wanted to. So the next gate for review is the 15th, and the thought here is probably not a fear, is that the 15th will apply to those folks who either are approved to go forward by the governor or not infected or whatever. We're trying to figure out what the gateway is going to be. But in any event, if we chose to go to full operations for us, if we still chose Monday to start that, it would only be 50% of our people anyway.
Correct.
Well, I think the general public is going to continue to be responsible, social distance, wear masks, wash their hands. I think that's going to continue into the foreseeable future. I hope that happens every flu season, not just now. Flu kills an awful lot of people. Now, back to my mortality rate. We have mortality due to the opioid crisis. We have a lot of different things that kill people. The fact is that we've had, as of today, I know it's going to be more, but over maybe a 3 or 4 month window, one person per 10,000 population. I think you need to look at the math a little bit. I don't want to sound heartless. It's terrible for every family that somebody passes away, but we are paralyzed due to fear. We need to come back to some normality, wear masks, social distance, but we need to come back and open this country and this county back up. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Haff. Supervisor Rozelle, I see your hand go up.
Yes, I'm just thankful that my 85-year-old father is in those statistics yet, mortality. And I'm quite sure there's people that aren't so lucky. There's no question about it.
Thank you, Supervisor Rozelle. Supervisor O'Brien?
So, question. I understand the mortality rate is extremely important, don't get me wrong. But I thought that the guidance that the state was talking about for opening up was more based on number of hospitalizations than mortality rate, because mortalities from COVID could extend for any number of weeks or even months if people kept alive on ventilators or other ways, which God forbid, I never want to see anyone in that situation. But isn't the measurement of whether they open or not based on mortality rate, but based on hospitalizations?
Yes, that's part of the equation. Sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to shut you off. You were saying something else?
No, I just asked him for clarification because we're concentrating on mortality rate, but I'm not sure that's the only thing goes into opening the areas up.
Yeah, I'm going to let Chris respond to that. Chris?
Mr. O'Brien, I don't have the criteria in front of me, but if I remember correctly, it is a combination of, in order to open under the regional reopening plan that's been laid out by the governor, you have to have 2 weeks of declining hospitalization rates and a decreasing trend. It doesn't necessarily have to be for 14 days, but a decreasing trend in infections. Actually, mortality is not taken into account in the reopening criteria. There are also trip points along the way. So once a region begins to reopen, once you hit a certain percentage of hospital bed capacity, that will be a trigger for the state to begin ratcheting social movement restrictions back into place. And I believe it's 75% hospital bed capacity. Because again, one of the things that's tricky with this is that there's roughly a 2% lead time. So once you get to the point where your hospital beds are 75% full, you've got 2 weeks of people who've been exposed that have no symptoms yet. And as that cohort moves its way through the disease progression, your hospital bed usage will continue to increase even after let's say you go back to a complete stay-at-home order. You will still have people who were inoculated 2 weeks ago that will need to move their way through the disease progression. So the mortality rate off the top of my head is not actually taken into account with the reopening and the return to stay at home if it should be needed. It is infection, hospitalization rate, and hospital capacity are the ones off the top of my head.
And I think if I read it right, if I remember it right, let me put it that way, that the numbers are talking about hospital beds is the ICU capabilities. and where they're filled up on the ICU units within their hospitals, if I remember that correctly. So, is there any other questions? Any other comments? Going once? Going twice? Look forward to seeing a majority of you, if not all of you, on the conference on the 8th of May for our committee meetings. We're adjourned.